HOA Karen destroys my brand new car. Watch how I made her regret it instantly. The day started like any other. I was excited to finally have my new car. A long-awaited purchase that ID worked hard for. It was sleek, shiny, and the first thing ID gotten that felt like a real reward for my years of hustle. The moment I got behind the wheel, there was a sense of pride and joy, mixed with a tinge of nervousness as I drove it out of the dealership. The streets felt different that day. I felt like a brand new chapter was unfolding for me. I drove around, taking it easy, making sure I wasn't too hard on the engine. I was careful with every turn, every stop, making sure I didn't scuff the perfect paint job. The anticipation of getting home and showing it off to my family made me even more excited. But little did I know that all of that was about to change. As I turned into my neighborhood, I noticed a few people gathered around the community park. It was the usual neighborhood drama. People standing around gossiping. Always something happening around here. But there was something else, a familiar figure standing near the corner, shaking her head as if she were orchestrating some sort of chaos. Of course, it was Karen from the HOA. I knew she had an opinion on everything, but I didn't expect her to have an issue with my car. I parked on the street just outside my house, and as I started to get out, I heard the unmistakable sound of a loud bang. It was followed by a sudden, sharp screeching sound. I turned around in horror and saw Karen standing by the front of my car, a crazed look in her eyes. She had somehow smashed her shopping cart into my car while ranting about how it wasn't a good fit for the neighborhood. I couldn't believe it. There was no accident, no mishap. This was deliberate. I stood frozen for a moment, processing the reality of the situation. This wasn't just some casual mistake. This was a personal attack on something ID worked so hard for. The adrenaline kicked in, and I knew this wasn't going to end quietly. Karen's actions were nothing short of destructive. As I turned to assess the situation, I saw her standing there, looking at my car as though it were an eyesore she couldn't bear to see in the neighborhood. The damage was immediate, and visible deep scratches ran down the side, and a large dent marred the once perfect bodywork. She had somehow slammed her shopping cart into the side of my car with enough force to leave a noticeable impact, leaving behind a trail of dented metal and scraped paint. Her expression was one of defiance, almost as though she was proud of what she had just done. "Doesn't belong here," she muttered, her words barely audible over the rush of my anger. This neighborhood deserves better than flashy, overpriced cars like this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My pride, my hard work, and my investment all seemed irrelevant to her. In that moment, she had taken something personal from me. And there she was, standing tall with no remorse. My mind raced as I processed her words. I had barely gotten a car a week ago, and to see someone intentionally damage it over something as trivial as their perception of what was right for the neighborhood felt absurd. I couldn't understand how she could be so blatant in her disregard for other people's property. This wasn't a mere accident. It was calculated. She had approached my car with her shopping cart like she had a mission to destroy what I had worked so hard for. I asked her, voice shaking with disbelief, "What the hell is wrong with you?" She shrugged as if to say she didn't care. "I just don't like it. I am sure that's nothing you can fix," she added dismissively, as though that somehow made it better. The nerve of her was maddening. She didn't apologize. She didn't show any remorse. In fact, she seemed completely unbothered by the destruction she had caused. It wasn't just about the physical damage. It was the sheer audacity of someone thinking they had the right to judge and destroy another person's belongings. I was filled with a mix of fury and disbelief. But one thing was clear. She wasn't going to get away with this. The immediate aftermath of what had just happened was a blur of emotions. As I stood there, staring at my newly damaged car, my mind struggled to comprehend the audacity of Karen's actions. The sight of the dent and scratches on the side of my car felt like a punch to the gut. I had worked so hard to afford this car, and now it was marred by someone else's thoughtless behavior. My heart raced, and the adrenaline surged through me. But all I could feel at that moment was a deep sense of violation. Karen, on the other hand, seemed unbothered by the damage she had caused. She stood there, arms crossed, as though nothing had happened, The words she muttered under her breath made it clear that she had no intention of taking responsibility for what she had done. In her eyes, it was just another nuisance in her life that she could eliminate with a quick swipe of her shopping cart. To her, my car didn't belong in the neighborhood, and that alone seemed to justify her actions. I felt a rush of anger and disbelief. I immediately took out my phone and snapped a few pictures of the damage, documenting everything in case this needed to be addressed later. I had no idea what to do next, but I knew I couldn't just let this slide. As I took a deep breath to calm myself, I realized I couldn't just let her get away with destroying my car. There had to be consequences for her actions. I turned toward Karen and tried to confront her, my voice shaky but firm. "Do you realize what you've just done?" I asked, my tone not as calm as I had hoped. But Karen's response was dismissive as she shrugged and said, "It's just a car. You can get it fixed." I couldn't believe her indifference. How could she be so nonchalant about something that had such a personal meaning to me? My mind was racing, trying to figure out the best course of action. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her off the hook. I walked away for a moment to gather my thoughts. It was time to figure out how to make her regret this moment. Not just for me, but for her as well. Taking action to make Karen regret her behavior was not something I did lightly. I knew I couldn't just let the situation slide. Not after everything I'd invested in that car and the blatant disrespect Karen had shown. But I also knew I needed to be strategic. Reacting in anger could make things worse, and I wasn't about to let her get the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. So, I decided to take a more calculated approach. The first step was to make sure I had all the documentation I needed to back up my claim. I took more photos, capturing every angle of the damage to my car. I even went so far as to take video footage of Karen standing near the car, just in case I needed evidence of her actions. It wasn't enough to just have the pictures of the damage. I needed to prove that this was deliberate and that she had no intention of owning up to what she had done. The more evidence I had, the stronger my case would be. Once I had everything documented, I immediately contacted the HOA. I wasn't about to let Karen's position in the community give her a free pass. I filed a formal complaint, outlining the damage to my car and providing all the evidence I had gathered. I explained how her actions were not only reckless but also completely unnecessary, and that I expected the HOA to hold her accountable. I knew this would take time, but I wasn't about to back down. Meanwhile, I started looking into legal options. I researched local laws about vandalism and damage to property, just to see what my rights were in this situation. I learned that because Karen had intentionally damaged my car, it could be considered an act of vandalism, and I could potentially seek compensation for the repairs. This wasn't just about making her regret her actions. It was about holding her accountable for the harm she caused. I also made sure to inform a few neighbors about what had happened, making it clear that this wasn't just a minor inconvenience but a deliberate act of aggression. I wanted to make sure Karen understood that her actions would not go unnoticed or unchallenged in this community. By the time I was done, I knew Karen wouldn't be able to walk away from this without facing some serious consequences. The final resolution of this ordeal wasn't as satisfying as I had hoped, but it was certainly a victory in its own way. After filing my formal complaint with the HOA and gathering all the necessary evidence, I began to see some real action being taken. The HOA started investigating the incident, and I could tell that Karen's standing in the community wasn't enough to shield her from the consequences of her actions. I had expected her to deny everything, but as more and more neighbors began to speak up, her defense began to crumble. While the HOA took its time to resolve the situation, I didn't sit idly by. I pursued the legal route as well. I spoke to a lawyer about the potential for filing a lawsuit for the damages to my car. They advised me that I had a solid case, and I should be able to seek compensation for the repair costs. I had the paperwork ready and was prepared to take things to court if necessary. But as I was gathering all the legal documentation, I received a call from the HOA informing me that Karen had agreed to cover the cost of the repairs. She had also been issued a fine for vandalism, and the HOA was considering further action against her for the disruption she had caused in the neighborhood. Although the process had taken some time, the sense of satisfaction in knowing that Karen would have to pay for the damage she caused was gratifying. Karen's apology, however, came late and was hardly sincere. She grumbled something about not realizing the extent of the damage and how it wasn't personal. But her words didn't carry the weight they should have. Her pride had been wounded, and the community was aware of her actions. For the first time, I felt like Karen truly understood the consequences of her reckless behavior. In the end, I learned a valuable lesson. Not everything is about instant gratification. Sometimes, justice takes time. And while the outcome wasn't as dramatic as I had initially hoped, I felt empowered knowing I had stood up for myself and held someone accountable for their actions. It wasn't just about my car, it was about standing my ground and showing that I wouldn't let anyone walk all over me. The experience reinforced the importance of doing the right thing, even when the road to resolution feels long and frustrating. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more shocking moments like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more unbelievable HOA drama and personal stories that you won't want to miss.